Welcome to Sew Very Easy. My name is Laura, and we sew for our family, we sew for our friends, we sew for our children, we sew for charity, we sew for just about anything. But do you sew for your sewing machine? Well, in this case, I do want to sew a faceplate cover. So I do have one of these beautiful little vintage featherweight machines. And there's a little screw right here on the front. And this comes back and forth. This little table moves so we can store it. But if you look, you can see that that wants to bang that screw. So this little area here can get damaged. So I'm going to make a little quilt to cover this area so it does protect my little arm. And I'm going to use the pattern from the Featherweight shop. Now you can get the pattern and you can get the pattern and the kit. When you look closely at your Featherweight, you'll find a little thumb screw here, and that takes this front plate off so that you can oil and do repairs. Because it is a thumb screw, it is a little bit higher and hits this little area here. So the little cover that I am going to make is like this little quilt. It's going to hook on and come underneath to protect this and keeps this entire area nice and protected. The pattern has all the sizes that you need, but we are going to need 2 pieces of fabric, a little piece of rickrack, and some quilt batting. After all, we are making a little quilt sandwich. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to place the batting to the wrong side of a strip of fabric and line that up. We're going to take that rickrack, fold it in half, and place it right at the top and pin it in place. And then place your second piece on top. We're going to do one seam along that top just to secure those edges and to hold that rickrack in. Now we will be using a 1/4 inch seam allowance throughout the project. And we do not need to backstitch. Just sew, and as you come to that pin, take that pin out. And now we have that top seam done. So when we open it up, we're going to have that little rickrack in between those layers. Now the pattern is very complete, but I would like to add, if we can just pull that little batting back out of the way and trim it off. We do not want to go through those seams, but just trim off that little extra batting. That's going to give a nice crisp edge when we turn this over. From here we need to do 2 rows of stitching. Match those pieces up, and at this point I would recommend pressing those together. So press these layers together, pressing from the fabric side. And then we're going to do 1 row of stitching right along that one edge. Back stitch up at that top, come down and back stitch at this bottom. Now the second side, we're going to stitch from the batting side. So we're going to turn it over and we're going to stitch with the batting on the top. When you start stitching your seams both from the same edge, the top, which is that finished seam, and stitch down, it maintains this to be the same size. And if we're sewing from the bottom coming up, we have a chance of the fabric dippling up at the top. Back stitch and go all the way down. Now we're going to be able to trim the fabric and turn it right side. The directions do have the trimming information, but just like the top, I do want to trim off that little extra batting. You don't have to, but it does give it a nice finished look. Before we turn that right side out, I would recommend trimming just a little corner off. That's just going to give a nice smooth edge. And turn it right side out. And be sure you go between the 2 fabric pieces. Get in there with a point turner and poke those little corners out. And they have a great little tip on how to make those really pointy. We do need to close off that little bottom. And you're going to find that the one piece of batting is closer to one side than the other. And that's the side I would recommend to fold in first. And I'm going to exaggerate it so that you can see it. So this is folding in, and by having it folded onto itself, it's going to make this little edge here smoother. So you're going to fold it in and tuck both sides in at about a 1/4 inch seam allowance. And then we're going to be able to press that. You can see how easy that will go in, and that gives us some nice side seams. Now we can close this, and there's a few different ways. We can hand stitch it, or we can top stitch it. With that little edge closed, we are now done. Or are we? After all, this is a little quilt. We could quilt it. I've decided to do the traditional diamond waves right down the center. And when my marks disappear and it's all pressed up, it has a beautiful little quilt look. And it's very easy to use. We're going to take that little loop and we're going to put it around that top screw. And then this piece is going to slide inside. And you put that foot down. That's going to hold it in place. That's going to protect that little screw from banging. So now when I close it, it's still really thin. It doesn't make it any bigger, but it does protect it. And it is also protecting this area and the feet. So I have a little quilt for my faceplate. That little cover is simple, it's fun to make, it doesn't take a lot of time, and it gives the protection that we need for our beloved featherweights. I'll put a link in the description so you can check out that pattern and make one for your little featherweight. Quilted or not quilted, they're a lot of fun to make. Thank you for joining me today on Sew Very Easy. Feel free to subscribe. I'm on Facebook, Instagram, and I do have a newsletter. It's all free under Sew Very Easy. And be sure to make every day a Sewtacular day. Bye for now.